Hello everyone, welcome to the 5-Minute Discovery Channel. An inch of land, an inch of gold. This saying has never been more ancient than in today's society, when land and house prices are increasing and becoming more valuable than ever. Land, which not everyone is lucky enough to own, has become an inevitable goal for many people in modern life. China, with a population of more than 1.4 billion people, naturally has a huge demand for housing. However, in reality, that thinking is not always correct, and it is not possible everywhere. The country next to China, Vietnam, has one of the largest rates of abandoned houses in the world, with familiar ghost urban areas, ghost cities like horror movies or heritage sites from ancient times. Wartime. These images, these stories are not only the truth about the current situation but also true stories about the uneven distribution of this precious resource on the planet. And now discover today's story of why China has so many royal families. Before going into the content, remember to like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Why does China have the most abandoned houses in the world, enough to cover the entire population of Vietnam? Welcome to today's story in China about real estate prices in the most densely populated and busiest cities such as Shanghai or Beijing are of course very terrible. This is not much different from the sandy soil in Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi in our country, but it only takes a few hours to go outside the two big cities. In China, finding ghost towns is definitely easier than seeing ghosts. China, a country with a population of more than 1.4 billion people, is witnessing a remarkable phenomenon in real estate: abandoned urban areas. Experiencing strong development, cities like Shanghai and Beijing are famous for their crowdedness and bustle. However, the halo of urban prosperity does not always shine fully. When you step out of bustling urban centers, just a few hours' drive away, you will easily encounter China's ghost towns. These places, although still maintaining a modern appearance and solid infrastructure, have become ghost cities with rows of deserted high-rise apartments. These are areas where not everyone wants to go, where the number of people is very small or even absent. From a distance, these urban areas still exude modernity and prosperity, but the reality is different. During rush hour, the roads of these ghost towns are often very sparse, with little traffic moving. Large real estate projects are uninhabited or have a very sparse number of residents, making these spaces extremely cold and mysterious. These images are not only the truth about real estate in China but also fascinating stories about the divide in global urban development. They are a testament to booms and busts, as well as profound questions about resource management and sustainable development of major economies. There was a famous ghost city in China, known as Odos, also known as Kango 10, located deep inland in the early 2000s. Initially, Odos was expected to be home to about 1 million people, but this number later decreased to 300,000, and by 2016 there were only 100,000 residents living here. This city once faced the risk of becoming a ghost city, but thanks to its best efforts, in early 2021, the government brought top schools to Odos, attracting new residents to return, and marked the deliverance of this city. However, not all ghost cities have such lucky opportunities as Odos. Most ghost urban areas in China have faced a situation of deserted customers that has lasted for decades. According to Chinese government estimates, about 65 million modern apartments and villas are lying unused. This means that, on average, one apartment for 3 people. These apartments can accommodate about 195 million people, twice the population of Vietnam. In fact, this number is large enough to contain the population of most countries in the world, such as the US with more than 300 million people, Indonesia with more than 270 million people, or even India with a population larger than 1 million people. Little compared to China. Although it seems unreasonable, this is a statement from the Chinese government, emphasizing that effective management and exploitation of real estate resources is an urgent issue and is being attempted to be resolved. The stories of Odos and other ghost cities are not only factual but also profound stories about urban development and global resource management. There is a view from the former deputy director of China's Statistics Bureau, saying that the number of 65 million abandoned houses is just an estimate, and there are many other sources giving different numbers. However, he emphasized that the current number of abandoned houses is enough to accommodate an unimaginable number: 3 billion people, which is more than 1/3 of the global population. This may seem absurd, but he emphasized that this is an extreme view, but also valid with exact numbers in hand. He said that, even though it is a somewhat outrageous view, these figures are still based on the seriousness and accurate statistical ability of the Chinese Bureau of Statistics. These numbers are not simply statistics, but also profound issues of urban resource management and humanity. They suggest waste and sustainable development approaches in urban construction and management. The story of abandoned houses in China is not only an internal issue of this country, but also an important lesson for the whole world about the proper allocation and use of resources. Why does China have so many abandoned houses? In Chinese media, over the years, stories about abandoned urban areas have become popular. These areas were once built with extremely grand and special facilities, such as the Paris Oriental area in Quanghua de Fan, but gradually became deserted and forgotten after their golden days. These urban areas, originally envisioned as symbols of wealth and luxury, are now desolate wastelands, where cattle herds and farmers farm amid uninhabited houses. One of the typical examples is the villa project developed by Greenland Group in Shanghai, built around the hills in Liaoning province. This project was started in 2010 with the initial plan of being a high-end villa complex for the upper class, with amenities such as a golf course and luxury hotel. However, after several years of implementation, the project stopped with only about 5% of products sold. The people living here were not the upper class but cattle herders, which became a symbol of the pain and failure of investors. These images reveal a state of emptiness and clear segmentation in Chinese society, where development projects go off schedule, leading to desolate and uninhabited areas. They are evidence of ineffective urban resource management and great waste of resources. The story of abandoned urban areas is not only a Chinese problem but also an important lesson about management and sustainability in global urban development. China is facing the world's largest abandoned real estate problem, and the cause is mainly due to the imbalance between supply and demand. Previously, during the construction boom since the late 1990s, Chinese cities developed strongly, using large areas of agricultural land in the countryside to build new urban areas. This is part of a strategy by local leaders to promote economic growth and land acquisition for investment in urban projects. However, with the rapid increase in real estate supply, the actual demand cannot be met. The quickly built apartments were handed over to investors, but did not find their final users. Real estate prices, due to hype from buying and selling demand, have skyrocketed, but those with real housing needs are not qualified to buy. This led to a real estate bubble and many urban areas became deserted. Abandoned houses in China are not without owners, but the owners are often investors and buyers, but there are no long-term users or tenants. This reflects a general trend, when people buy houses not only to live in but also consider it as an investment. They buy houses to keep for a long time, wait for the price to increase and then resell them for a big profit, but in reality that is not the case. This issue is not just a Chinese problem but also an important lesson for real estate management and global urban development. It shows the importance of regulating the real estate market in a balanced and sustainable way, to ensure resources are used effectively and limit waste. Stories of abandoned urban areas are a clear demonstration of the need for coordination between the government, investors and people to build a sustainable and developed living environment. The Chinese government has taken advantage of land leasing to collect large sums of funding from developers, which has created a strong incentive to encourage real estate development rather than restrict the housing market. Therefore, China has built a lot of housing in many different forms. According to The Economist, China builds about 15 million new homes each year, 5 times more than the US and Europe combined. However, the reality is that demand is actually not that high. China's population is not increasing much and is even decreasing. The rising cost of living makes people afraid to have children, and many people fear the difficulties in daily life. Therefore, China's population is currently only second in the world after India, and in recent years, their population is even at risk of decreasing year by year. These challenges raise questions about the sustainability of the real estate development model in China. Building too much housing for which there is no real need is not only a waste of resources but can also lead to serious social and economic problems. This requires more careful adjustment and consideration from the government and managers to ensure sustainable development and harmony with the real needs of the people. Back to the real estate story. Initially, developers and home buyers in China always expected that their property values would continuously increase. They believe that urban areas will continue to grow and house prices will never decrease. However, reality has shown otherwise. House prices in China have fallen sharply in recent times, as the real estate crisis spreads more widely and deeply. We are familiar with information about the collapse of leading real estate corporations in China, from Evergrande to Country Garden. These companies, although very famous and owning many large projects, had to declare bankruptcy with hundreds of billions of dollars in debt. For example, Country Garden, one of China's largest companies, is not only a real estate investor but also the owner of the Guangzhou Football Club. This team used to be the strongest team in Asia. Looking at abandoned urban areas in China, we see that unfortunately many Vietnamese people still do not have a house to live in, while big cities are building a lot of apartments. The story of the collapse of the real estate market in China is a great lesson for us. It reminds us that, for sustainable and reasonable development in the real estate sector, we need to consider carefully and not let the market exceed demand. Otherwise, we may fall into such a crisis, and market recovery will take a lot of time and effort. Thank you for your interest and companionship with this story. This is a touching story and full of learning about the real estate market, a downside of rapid development. If you find it interesting, remember to like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Now say goodbye and see you again.